Welcome to this session, Preparing for Sixth Form. In today's webinar, we're going to be reflecting on the differences between school and sixth form, so year 12 and year 13, and considering effective studying techniques, so ones that work for you and how you might be able to apply those to both your sixth form studies and also your university application as well. And then thinking ahead to university, both applying and studying. So as I've said, putting all of this in the context of university and applying and studying, both elements. So I've got a question for you, first of all. What do you think in terms of studying at university, so in terms of being a university student? Imagine that you are a university student. What do you think are the opportunities and what are the challenges that you're expecting? So if you want to put your answers in the chat. What are some challenges and what are some opportunities? Oh, thank you. We've got a comment. Opportunities to join different clubs, societies. Yeah, absolutely. To learn new skills, to meet new people, to do additional things in addition to your studies. Absolutely. Extracurriculars. There are lots of societies at university. So I think we've got both a challenge and an opportunity in this next comment. So managing workload, absolutely. In terms of independent study, the core content of your course through lectures, seminars, supervisions, what have you, maybe practicals, and you are responsible for that. So yeah, managing your own workload, that sort of independence, and freedom to read around the subject. So that's another element of independence, I guess. That's an opportunity, having the opportunity to go even deeper into the subject or subject areas that you most enjoy. Absolutely, thank you. Research projects, yes, so the opportunity to do your own, maybe in the summer. That's where a lot of our students at St John's, at Cambridge generally, do their internships, do their research projects. Absolutely. So moving on to my next slide, I think we've covered quite a few of these already, so thank you very much for your comments. So independent study is really crucial at university. In a few later slides in today's session, I've got some example timetables for both a humanities and a STEM student. And what isn't shown in those timetables is independent study. All that I've got on those example timetables are the contact hours, as we call them. So the supervisions, the practicals, the laboratory experiments, if you're a STEM student, and the lectures and all of the other sort of classes equivalent at uni. So yeah, absolutely, independent study is really crucial. Studying for an undergraduate degree as a way of developing transferable skills. So time management, managing your own workload, I guess would come under this as well. And then improving skills like communication, written and verbal communication. Going to university is not the only way to develop these transferable skills, but it's definitely an excellent way of doing so. And academic freedom, we had this before as well. So this ticks off our third and final bullet point on this slide. You get to delve deeper, you get to explore, think about what you would say in terms of an argument, how you would solve a problem, and also what it means when you have this academic freedom, is that you gain skills in responding to challenges to your ideas and constructive feedback as well. So that's all of that is sort of meshed up all into academic freedom there. I've got at the bottom of the slide CAM guides. I may have recommended this to you in a previous session. I probably have. I can't remember now which webinar it would have been, but it might have been the study skills one if you attended that one. But CAM Guides is a great resource. It's designed by the University Libraries team here at Cambridge. It's completely free for you to access. You don't need a login at all. You just need to click through onto that hyperlink, so I'll share the slides for you, but you can also just Google CAM guides and that should get you there. And if you go to the undergraduate section, essentially all of the resources there are to help students in the transition from school to university, but it's definitely something you can use at the stage that you're at right now, because a lot of the resources about time management, about academic note-taking, referencing, citations, all of those academic skills, and indeed some of those transferable skills as well that we've talked about. There's lots of resources and guidance on it. So I love recommending this resource. I think it's absolutely fantastic. So definitely have a look at CAM guides if you haven't already. So some more questions for you then. How do you define effective learning and revision? What does that look like for you? And what techniques and methods work for you as well? So I guess those two questions are very similar. What does it look like for you to be effectively studying, learning, revising, what have you? If you could pop your thoughts, your reflections in the chat, and then we'll have a read through. Thank you. Thanks. We've had a not procrastinating comment. Yes, absolutely. So being methodical and knowing when you need to do a task by, and having that routine in place, so you know that you're either blocking out your time or you have a set time or a set day where you do a set task or subject, whatever works for you, but not putting things off. Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like a very effective way of studying, of learning. We've got two comments here, but both saying much the same thing. Ensuring that you fully comprehend what the subject or what the topic is actually about, rather than just memorizing, so that you can regurgitate facts or rehearsed equations or what have you. Actually knowing that you understand something. Often we say that if you're able to explain it to someone else, that's how you can really tick off that you grasp that topic, that question, that subject. Taking tests, so yeah, doing mocks, doing practice papers, testing yourself, testing your friends. It's that recall, absolutely, yeah. Yes, being really on it with time management. Excellent. We've had some great comments there. I haven't gone through all of them, but thank you very much. I think, again, you have preempted my slide here. So first of all, let me go back and focus on the first box here. So taking in the information, reading actively or watching or listening actively, not having distractions, doing it in manageable chunks. So that time management comes into play there as well. And we've already had this, testing your recall, reviewing, reflecting, testing yourself on the material regularly, so you can really assure yourself that you do know what you've been learning, what you've been studying or revising, and that really helps cement it in your head as well. Scheduling your studies, so working out what goals are realistic to you. So the individual there in that bullet point at the bottom is really crucial. So when we think about scheduling your own studies, it really is about what works for you. Making sure that when you're making your revision timetable or your study timetable, when you're tracking your progress, be reflective and say, okay, I set myself, let's say, 5 things to do, and I only managed to get through 3 out of the 5. And why is that? Is it that I wasn't managing my time effectively, or is it that I gave myself too much to do and it wasn't realistic? It wasn't a realistic goal for me. So make sure that you aren't just setting a timetable and then that's it. If you're setting a timetable or drawing up your routine for studying and revision, make sure you're being reflective with that. Practicing for the exam, so working through past papers, working through the questions in timed conditions to make sure that you're able to respond to these exam questions in those time constraints, and familiarizing yourself with the mark schemes. I think that's a really important way of revising, in conjunction with actually working through the past papers. Realizing what the examiners are really looking for in the questions can really help when you're coming to tailor your own answers in timed conditions as well, making sure you're using key terms and hitting all those assessment objectives, or whatever they're called. And then a bit like with the timetable that you've drawn up for your studies, make sure you're being reflective. So reviewing the mocks, reviewing the past papers, reviewing the tests, and follow up with your teacher for any further feedback or comments, and make sure you know where you missed the marks on a certain question or what else you need to brush up on, because it will be, again, individual to you, and make sure you're using those opportunities of doing the past paper questions to their full potential. And finally, but most importantly, look after yourself. Make sure you're taking regular active breaks, so you're actually stepping away from your desk, from your study area, wherever you may be, and speak to your friends and your teachers. It's really important to sort of loop them in. If you're having any problems, if you feel that your workload is not manageable, if you feel that you're really struggling with a certain topic, reach out to your friends. Maybe they're studying a similar subject, but maybe you're also just going to ask them how they found revision, or how they've timetabled their studies. Perhaps you can also use a technique where you both sort of study separately, but then you check in with each other after at your break, let's say, and you tell each other what you've done, what you've studied. Holding each other accountable as a kind of study buddy way might work for you. So that's a really important point, I think, looking after yourself. Okay, so now we're going to shift and think about this in a university context. And before we do, I just wanted to put this chronological slide up, this timeline slide. You may have seen this in another session, and you may be familiar with this, but I just wanted to go over this to put things in context for you. So you're about to go into year 12, you're about to go into the first year of your sixth form studies. So university applications might be something that is coming up on the horizon, and I wanted to put this timeline on the screen for you so you know what's coming up. So a lot of the things that I'm saying on this slide, like check the deadlines, submit the written work, these won't be relevant to you until about a year's time. So I just wanted to do that disclaimer first of all, but this gives you an overview of how the application process works for Cambridge and sort of when you need to do various things. So the first step that you'll be doing, and this is something that you'll be doing throughout your year 12, is deciding on your university choices, right, for UCAS, picking your course. In particular, picking your Cambridge course if you're thinking of applying for Cambridge. On the later slides, we'll have a look at a few example course pages and the things you need to look out for. Then, after you've picked your course, or you've sort of got a well way into making that decision, choosing your college, or deciding to make an open application, which is that you don't make a college preference at point of application, that's the next step there. And then, before you are submitting through UCAS, and the UCAS Oxbridge deadline is called the early deadline sometimes, it's typically 15th of October, 6 p.m. UK time. So before that early deadline, you may have to register for a thing called an admissions assessment. So we call them pre-registration required admissions assessments. It's quite a mouthful. They tend to be for the science courses. So an example is the BMAT for medicine. So these change every year in terms of the tests, the registration deadlines. So make sure that you are checking the relevant web pages. If you just go to Cambridge Admissions Assessment, you'll find the right page there. These deadlines are often before the early UCAS deadline. That's why I've put it as step 3 as opposed to step 4. And then after you've submitted through UCAS, what you'll be doing is you'll be completing any additional forms. So we have an application form that we require our applicants to fill in. So this is about a week after they submit through UCAS. And then depending on the course that you've applied for, you might have some written work to submit. So this will be examples of your classwork. Or you might have an admissions assessment to do as well. So those admissions assessments that you've registered for in advance. And so you take those around October, November time. Again, varies every year. So make sure you're checking the website for updates. And then if you're invited to interview, it would be in the first 3 weeks of December for Cambridge normally. And then your decision, so whether you have an offer or not, will be in January. So that's when the decision is. So that timeline from when you apply proper from October time onwards, it's quite a concentrated timeline, but actually step 1, you're starting to think about that now, maybe even earlier you've started to think about it. So I wanted to give that as a sort of overview, an intro slide. The next one is, again, another sort of summary slide. You may have seen this before. It's basically what are we looking for in our applicants. So what's important, first of all, we're assessing your academic ability and your academic potential. What that actually means in practice is a whole host of things. So it's both your academic record, but it's also things like enthusiasm for your chosen course, knowledge of that subject, whether you meet the subject requirements or whether you're taking the right courses in order to apply for this particular Cambridge course. And then intellectual interest and initiative, I'll come on to in just a later slide. But what I wanted to pause on about academic record is just on the left of the screen here. So typically offers, I'm talking in terms of A levels here, but you'll be able to find the equivalents on our webpage, the qualification equivalents. Typically the offers would be between A star AA and A star A star A. So it does depend on the course, and also each individual applicant would be made an offer that is individual to them. And what's also important to note is that most entrants, so most students that succeed and meet their offer conditions, actually exceed their offer conditions. They don't just meet it, but they exceed it. There's a little bit of info on a later slide about that. In terms of GCSEs, most entrants, so successful applicants to Cambridge, typically have high proportions of 7s, 8s and 9s at GCSE, but there isn't actually a minimum requirement. And we look at your GCSE results, indeed, we look at everything that you're submitting in context. So by context, I mean your own individual personal educational circumstances and your own sort of the school where you took your GCSEs, their school, overall school performance for GCSEs as well. We put everything in context in terms of like your class, your year. We have all of that information. So it's not just the number or the grade alone in isolation, in a vacuum, as it were. We put it in that reality. In terms of what we're not looking for, because we're not interested at all, we're not looking for students from a particular type of background or school, and also any extracurriculars that you're doing that aren't relevant to your subject, your chosen academic area, they're not going to be taken into consideration. So the fact that, let's say, you're applying for maths, but you're an excellent musician, that's not going to factor in because our decisions are academic based. That's what our admissions decisions are based on: academic ability and academic potential. So this intellectual interest and initiative, I can see a question that's popped up asking how would you demonstrate that, and enthusiasm. This is what I'm going to come to next. So super curricular engagement or subject enrichment or subject exploration, what is it? You might have heard of it. Essentially, it's delving deeper. You might have heard of it called reading around your subject, but it is more than reading, which we'll come to in a later slide. But that's a nice way of summarizing it. It's building on what you're learning in school in terms of your subjects, enhancing what you are covering. It's going beyond. Super basically means beyond the curriculum, and it's completely unique to you. So whatever you find most interesting in your subject area, whatever academic area you're applying for, you find interesting, within that, the topics, the questions that really pique your curiosity, that's what your subject enrichment will focus on. We do have some suggestions of where to start. So we've got a super curricular suggestions document. This isn't like a prescribed reading list or anything like that. It's not prescriptive in that sense, but it's good starting points if you're looking to delve deeper, and it's split by course. So if you Google super curricular suggestions Cambridge, a PDF should pop up and you'd be able to browse those suggestions. But these are just starting points, so it will be unique to you. What you're aiming to do with this subject enrichment is really deepen your understanding of topics, of questions, key concepts. And it should be this sort of natural, organic process where, as you find out more, you're satisfying that initial curiosity, you're answering that initial question. But then by reading more, by exploring further, you've uncovered something else. Maybe you've been able to put two topics together in a really interesting way that you hadn't considered before. And so then you'll go on because your curiosity has been piqued again by something else. So that's an important point, I think, that it's this sort of ongoing process that you'll know that the subject is right for you, really, if this super curricular, this subject enrichment, this exploration around your subject, delving deeper, if that feels really enjoyable to you, then you'll know you've hit the spot with the subject choice. So a top tip is to explore widely, but be focused. So it's really quality over quantity. So we definitely want you to read widely and explore initially, But then when you're coming to put this in your application, when you're writing about this in your personal statement, which will be something you're considering further down the line, it's really about what you have got from that exploration, not listing loads of things that you've read, for instance, but taking a select few things that may be linked together in interesting ways and talking in a little bit more detail about those things. So some examples then of the resources that you can use to explore your subject further, to do this supercurricular exploration, i.e. helping you put together your competitive application for university and helping you demonstrate, here it is, that intellectual interest and initiative, which is basically university level thinking. I've got lots of examples here. So these are all the resources. We've got some academic magazines and journals, also some online resources and some sort of question banks like Underground Mathematics and Enrich. Also museum exhibitions, a lot of them are digitized, a lot of them are online, podcasts and documentaries. There's a whole host there. So there are a lot that are listed in that supercurricular suggestions document. So definitely have a look there if you're interested further. So why would you bother doing this? Why would you make this a habit? And particularly, I want to focus on why would you start or really do this with a concerted purpose now? Why would you bother doing this at the stage that you're at? So I think it really helps, first of all, improve your grasp of what you're currently studying. It's going to help you with your revision, and it's going to help cement those A-level or whatever qualifications you're taking, those subjects. It's going to help you cement that subject knowledge. It's going to be fun and interesting for you because you're going to expand your areas of interest. You'll find out things, maybe you'll discover a whole subject area or a whole academic question that you never knew existed before. So it's something that can be really interesting and enjoyable. It also helps support your university applications. So the earlier you start doing this in a really methodical way, the better, because then by the time you're coming to do your personal statement, by the time you're putting together your university application, you'll already have built up this bank of skills, of knowledge, of resources around your subject area that you can draw upon when you're putting your application together. It also helps you make that really important first choice. If we think back to the timeline slide earlier, step number one was choosing your course, was making that subject choice. That's a really important decision. And doing this sort of exploration around your subject helps you figure out whether you want to study it at university. As I was saying just earlier, if when you're doing this sort of delving deeper, reading more, exploring further, and you're really enjoying it, then that's a sign that the subject you've chosen is the right one for you. And it gives you a taster of university level study, which can be really important, again, to cement that you do want to study that, but to also give you an idea of what it might be like. So you're practicing those skills of academic note-taking, of finding resources and summarizing the points and thinking about an argument you could pose back against challenging the resource, perhaps. So it's that taster of, in particular, I think, supervisions or tutorials at Oxford, these small group discussion-based teaching and learning sessions where you really are bringing forward your own ideas and sort of thinking about how you would back those up with evidence. So that's the sort of thing that you'd be doing as a university student. So developing those skills through this supercurricular exploration is a really good thing. So how do you go about doing this? So I've got a step 1 to 6 here. This is basically what you can do when you find a resource. So let's say it's an article about a question that really interests you in your subject area. What you can do in terms of analysing it and critically thinking about it. So the first one is, once you've found, the step 1 is to search. So you need to find the resource. You can find these through the supercurricular suggestions document, as I've mentioned earlier, indices in the back of a book, a textbook. Also, there are lots of resource hubs out there as well, and you can also ask for recommendations. Then once you've found the resource, step 2 is to evaluate it. So what sort of article, let's say, is it? Why was it written? Who wrote it? Have they got citations to back their arguments up? Really analyze the provenance, the purpose. I really like to put my sort of GCSE history hat on when I'm thinking about this, because I think evaluating the source is the kind of thing that you should be doing here in step 2. And then, can you summarize the main points, the main arguments from this resource? What have you taken from it? Then reflecting and responding. This is, I think, really crucial, perhaps the most crucial step here. What have you gained from it? Were there any concepts that you learned, any sort of subject-specific terms, terminology? Can you think of an alternative viewpoint, an alternative approach that would maybe have a completely different argument, would result in a completely different article or resource? What questions are you left with? So the resource might have made you think about things in a completely different way. So where will you go next? Where will you go in terms of your further research? And then as you do more of this and as you build up this bank of resources, can you make connections between that and another topic or another article or whatever it may be that you've explored through this supercurricular exploration? And then step 5, discuss. So as we said before, with that effective learning technique of consolidating what you know by explaining it to someone else, really ensuring that you fully grasp something, consolidate what you've learned from the article by telling someone else about it. And maybe you can share with your peers as well, share with friends. Maybe they're studying quite similar subjects, or maybe they're studying very different subjects and they want to do very different courses at uni, but you've actually found an article that kind of speaks to both subjects, both academic areas. And then 6, as I was saying before, it's a natural organic process. So you really are following wherever that thread, wherever your curiosity, I guess, leads. So maybe there was a recommendation at the end of the article, or maybe you have a question that has been sort of thrown up by that article, and then you're going to go off and research that next. So follow on where that thread leads. The 2 points I want to end this slide with are, what do you think? First of all, and then keep a record of what you discover. So the first one, what do you think? It kind of relates to step 4 here. We're really interested about your own opinions when we're going to be interviewing you, when we're reading your personal statements, and when you're a student at university. It's really about what you make of something. So make sure that you are reflecting, not just summarizing each article or documentary or podcast or whatever it may be that you've come across, but really reflect on what your personal opinions are about that. And can you back those up with evidence? Can you connect those with something else you've learned? And then the second takeaway message, I guess, is to keep a record. So you can do this by having a supercurricular log, a sort of research logbook, if you will. You can make a note of the resource. So maybe it's a URL of where you found the article. Maybe it's a printed out copy. Maybe it's a note of the chapter in the book and the author, something that you will be able to use later when you're coming to write your personal statement to find that resource again, right? And be able to read or rewatch or re-listen, whatever it may be, so that you can sort of review it. Because there's nothing worse than making a note that isn't quite complete enough of something that you've discovered or read or watched or what have you, and then not being able to find it again. So it could be just a bookmarks folder on your device, whatever it may be, but make sure you are keeping a record of these resources that you are coming across in your exploration of your subject. So again, at the bottom, what you're demonstrating here is that intellectual curiosity. And what that means is that independent research, that critical thinking, both of these skills that are crucial skills for being a university student. Next up, I've got some advice that I've taken mainly from the Subject Matters PDF, which is a resource from the university for prospective applicants. So I've got a summary, first of all, of subject choices. So what sort of subjects you might be thinking about taking for particular university courses. First of all, for the science courses then. So we generally advise applicants to take 2 to 3 of physics, further maths, biology, chemistry. And you can find some typical combinations of these that kind of make sense. For engineering, for example, it's usually maths and physics because those are the required subjects. And a good thing to note is that most successful applicants for Cambridge science courses have 3 to 4 of those science or maths A levels, so biology, chemistry, maths, further maths and physics. But there is more guidance on the Subject Matters page, that PDF that I've linked there. Oh, I seem to have not included the humanities. Apologies there. I will try and add it to my my slides. Apologies, it's slipped out. Essentially, it's a big list, and don't even have an exhaustive list on the slide that I was meant to include in this webinar, but we generally advise you to be taking a mix of languages, history, and also some maths and social sciences and science courses as well. There will be some, again, required subjects that make sense, so something like a language for a language course and things like that. But in terms of the combinations, you can go really broad with them. You can mix maths and maths and science courses with arts and humanities courses as well. There are lots of sort of suggested subjects there, but there's not an exhaustive list by any means. So definitely go to that same web PDF, sorry, the subject matters post-16 subject choices, and just look for the arts and humanities section. Apologies for missing that out. I don't know what happened to my slide there, but it is all in that PDF anyway. So what I've got now is an example course page. So a Cambridge course page. I've just picked chemical engineering and biotechnology for the sciences, and let's hope that I have a humanities option. There we go. Yes, I have one for the humanities music. So on both of these slides, I've just taken screenshots of relevant parts of the course page. It's also essentially what you'll come across if you're looking at a prospectus for pretty much any university course. You'll see very similar things. So you'll see often something like entry requirements or typical offers, or minimum offers, something like that. And you'll usually see it in A-level and IB, but then there should be a link to other qualifications as well. Then next, what you'll see is, are there any subjects that you have to be studying in order to apply for the course? So that's where subject requirements come in. And then what you'll find, particularly for Cambridge and also for Oxford, there might be an additional admissions assessment, as we mentioned earlier, and also some submitted work. So you'll see that there's the equivalent there for music on the next slide. The grey box for both of these is something I wanted to draw your attention to. It's relating to what I mentioned earlier. When we had the what's important and what are we looking for on those slides, I did mention that the majority of entrants, so most successful applicants to Cambridge, end up exceeding the conditions of their offer. So the typical offers or the minimum offers, they actually end up exceeding that. To get a sense of this sort of academic field, you can look at these grey boxes on the course website, and I think they're really useful to get a sense of both. It's usually in A-level grades, both in terms of grades that they've achieved, but also in terms of subjects as well. So I think I've seen a question in the chat about a particular subject. So if you go to that subject's webpage and look at what sort of the typical A-levels, the typical subjects are that successful applicants have taken, that will really support your sort of your information and your own guidance about what subject, what course to choose as well. So that's a really important thing to remember. I think the grey box on the university website for each course. Okay, on this slide, I've got an overview of what the teaching and learning methods are at university. So what I'm aiming to do with this slide, and also the next couple, which are those example student timetables that I mentioned, is just to give you a sense of the sorts of things and how you will be studying at university. So first of all, lectures, really standard, right? Maybe the first thing you think of when you think of university. So lectures are sort of the key component, the key course content will be delivered through your lectures. And then you might also have seminars or example classes. That's something that we have for our math students here. And then depending on whether you're taking a science subject or not, you might have practicals or labs. Group work and sort of research projects as well will be an element at some point in your course, most likely, particularly for the science students, I think. And then supervisions and tutorials, so those small group discussion-based sessions where you'll be with an academic, a supervisor or a tutor, and you'll have maybe one or two other students max in those supervisions or those tutorials. So that'll be a place where you can come prepared, having written a response to a question, having worked through an example sheet, a problem sheet of different questions if you're maths or sciences, and you'll sort of work through it together. You'll collaboratively think about solutions or arguments, all sorts of ideas. So it's a kind of a safe space to flesh out, figure out your ideas as you're sort of forming them, and also to get more individual feedback and more individual support to complement the content that you're getting in the lectures. So if there's something you don't quite understand, you might find that it's going to be covered in the supervision as well. And then trips and projects abroad, that again depends on the course, but that might be a way that you're learning as a university student as well. So I've got the example STEM student timetable first of all. So we've got first of all for the natural sciences course. This is just an example. You will see that there are quite a lot of contact hours listed. And what you'll also see is that for some students, for some years, you might have lectures on a Saturday morning as well for natural sciences. And I think maybe for maths in particular years, this is relevant. So as well as those lectures, you will have supervisions. You can see them dotted about here, supervisions, and also practicals. They tend to be in the afternoon, I think, your laboratory experiments, your practicals. For humanities students, so I've got history as just an example timetable here, you'll see that there are fewer contact hours. You've got lectures, you've got a sources class, so a sort of more of a seminar style, a larger class group, and you've also got your supervisions as well. So you will see that there are some differences, but as I said earlier, what's not included here, of course, social time, extracurriculars, and your independent study. So that managing of your own workload, balancing your sort of work life and your social life in that sense, that's something that these timetables don't actually tangibly show, right? But is there. So that independent study being crucial and also that work-life balance being crucial is something that I wanted to mention when I showed these timetables. And I think, yeah, that brings me to the end of the content that I have for today. So I'll pause the recording here, and if anyone is watching the recording, then please do get in touch if you have any questions. The email is on the screen there, accessofficer@joh.cam.ac.uk.